I hope that some of you will have already been prompted by the poster and the press release I sent out to look at his podcast, Tree Amble, which I was reading through it earlier today, and his sense of passion and personal commitments, legacy, if you like, to trying to connect nature and people and communities so strong. And obviously that's a vision that's kept him going for all of his professional life. He's a very senior official within the Woodland Trust, is in charge of all partnerships, so I'm very glad that Friends of the Old Way is now more or less a partner to the Woodland Trust, who have planted over 5 million trees in Cumbria. And he himself, I believe, told me, has personally contributed to planting about 500,000 trees and wild restoration of wildflower meadows and so on. So he's made his own personal contribution and continues to do so. He's been working in the Woodland Trust for over 30 years. He moved to Cumbria at the end of the 90s. He lives in Keswick. And so he's a man who has so much knowledge, experience to share tonight. I'm very, very pleased to have him with us. Here in Watermillen, we're surrounded by very committed members of the community and people who are doing in their own lives a great job, actually in line very much with your vision. We're surrounded by farmers and by local community volunteers who do a lot already for the sort of work that you're going to tell us about tonight. So I think you'll find this a very receptive audience, both in the hall here and also on Zoom. So without more ado, I'll pass the floor to Pete. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
I think we're going to have about an hour chat, if that's okay. And I would like to get to a point where we get some questions. So that would be fantastic. I always like to get audience feedback and lots of questions. I hope we'll not create too much controversy, but some questions would be nice. So thanks very much for that introduction. I'm a bit overwhelmed, actually. So there's a slide coming up that says, am I Woodland Trust or am I Tree Amble? The answer is, of course, I've been paid by the Woodland Trust for 30 years. The Tree Amble project came out of those 30 years. I decided that I really, Lee Stokely wrote a book. I'm sure you all know Lee. Lee wrote a book. James Rebanks has written books. I couldn't bring myself to write a book, but I did want to try and go back over those 30 years and tell some of the stories of the people I've met, because that 30-year period is half my life. I became a conservationist 30 years ago. I am a conservationist. There's lots of other things that go on in life, but conservation is definitely one of them. And in that time, flying insects in the UK have still gone down by 64%. We've lost lots of farm and birds. We're still damming rivers. We're still polluting watercourses. We're still on a downward trajectory in terms of wildlife. And for all the efforts I've been to, and everybody else that I work with, we're still on a downward spiral. So we have to do something about it. And I thought, rather than just sinking into gloom, I would go and find some of those people I've worked with, go and get their positive stories and try and work those positive stories into some kind of narrative, which links people back up. It gives them hope. It gives them a direction of travel that we can kind of buy into. So during my travels, these are some of the people I met. Alan, who is one of the most amazing ancient and veteran tree persons. He knows loads about old trees. I met him in Cairngorms under this fantastic granite pine. And he told me all about his mental health, how poor his mental health had been, how trees had gotten out of that sun. Lee Schofield at the nursery at Haweswater, talking about how he's pulled the Haweswater around and how they've got a tree nursery there. They now employ 23 people on that site. There all sorts of great things. These two lovely guys, Tom and Owen, we'll come on to them later on. They did an amazing project in Yorkshire with wildflowers. And then I've got wildflower business, bees, goats, cheese, honey, all sorts of things coming out of it. Really positive story, two very young people. My old mucker John, I was at school with John, and he said, I want to be a geologist, and I said, I want to be a forester. And he's a soil scientist. He's done that. I'm still working with trees. We got together for a chat earlier, and it was like being back to school again. That's fantastic. Lots of people. Harriet, who works down in Wakelands in Suffolk, who is an organic dairy, organic bakery. Some of the bread there and cheese that she gave to us when we were down there. Jack Spees, director of the Woodland Trust in the Ribble. Myself, in the Wildflower Meadow, which I sow. Fidelity Western, Pasture for Life down the Kent. And this lovely big Galloway cow, with no name, unfortunately, with a number, doing some conservation raising for us in Yorkshire. So these are some of the folks that I've worked with and wanted to talk to. So yeah, I work for Woodland Trust. That's it. Maybe Amble is my fun project on the side, which brings people together. So it's my 31st year at the Woodland Trust. In that time, I've done woodland management and creation. I've acquired land for the trust. I'm a chartered surveyor by training, so I've bought land from Humberside through to the Wirral, up to the Scottish border and in Northern Ireland as well. We've acquired quite a lot of sites in Northern Ireland. That was entertaining. A few occasions there where I was told to shut up, I sounded too English, which is great. I'm now doing bits of farm advice and working now pretty much in Cumbria, and I've worked over the north. My role really is to work with landowners, land managers to increase tree cover. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But that tree cover thing, don't think about woodlands all the time, think about hedgerows, field trees, scrub trees, trees along water, riverbanks, etc. Tree cover in the right places for that. Well, I love wildflowers. I love what wildflowers can do for nature. So I have a bit of a wildflower thing going on as well. And latterly, I think I've really cottoned on to regenerative agriculture. So this is this new shift. It's not necessarily organic farming, but it's farming in a way which the principles of which are that you end up with more at the end of the day than you have to start with. So you're regenerating soils, hedgerows, etc., adding back to land. So regen ag is definitely something I'm going to talk more about later on. But as I was sat trying to think about where to start with this project and where to come in, I thought back in my mind, I'd read somewhere about how good the fishing was on Altwater 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And I pretty much having not read the book for 15 years or so, I pretty much went straight to the paragraph in Hannah Hawkswell's book. And it says, I recall the time when an all-day fishing trip using flies, I could land 50 trout, no trouble at all. And I thought to myself, I've tried fishing for trout in Altwater, and I might get one or two. I can't catch 50. This kind of captured it for me, is actually, we have lost so much nature in our landscape. There's another book on the Livernet, which I read recently, where one of the people who wrote the book, his grandfather wrote in his diary that he and his brother went out and caught a score trout on the Livernet in a day. You can't do that. And there's lots of reasons why that's not possible. But I just thought, bring this back to Altwater. That was a really interesting kind of thought. And in my work, I get to work with lots of landowners, lots of farmers, lots of people concerned about land. And we bring in funding for lots of different things, different points. One of them I'm really keen on is monitoring. It's all very well thinking we know what the right thing to do is, but when we do it, do we ever monitor it? And the answer is most of us don't monitor. We don't have a good long-term view of what we've done. So I've set up monitoring programs over the last 10 years to get ecologists in to say, well, have you done the right thing? Is this working? What's happening? And I thought this was an interesting thing. Obviously, not going to be the name of the site or the person who sent this to me, but I thought this was really interesting. This may be a little early for measuring the effects of tree planting, but other sites we've seen some big increases in inversions, i.e. insects and water courses, particularly within 7 years of stock exclusion. Whether this is just down to groundwater changes or also due to pesticides, now we have no sheep in the fashion, it's difficult to pin down. but this particular site is a very good place to consider these factors. I'm not blaming everything on farming. I'm certainly not blaming everything on farming or whatever, but we use a lot more chemicals in all the things we do, in our sewage, in our daily life. We pour all sorts of things down the sink and we don't think about it again, but it pops up in the lakes and the rivers. We have things on our animals. Our way of living is quite extractive and quite abstract. So actually, when we start to think about restoration to ecology, we start to get other effects like more insects coming back, more birds coming back. And these things I think are just interesting to have in the back of your mind. So is conservation still intrinsically focused on safeguarding nature, or are humankind also part of the project? In my 30 years and in the conversations I've had over the last 18 months doing tree Amble, everyone has come back to me and said, no, we're part of nature. We are nature. When we try and put ourselves beyond nature, that's when we start to fail. Because as soon as we do that, we start to exclude nature and believe it's not necessary. We are part of nature. And I think when we bring nature back into what we do and how we think, then we start to re-engage with what we really are. So in terms of my work and what me and my colleagues are concerned about, I've called this primary thinking. What are the drivers that make us get up in the morning and really focus on our activity? Climate change, that is going to be the biggest shift in people around the world, in water, in food, in the next decades. It's already happening. It's moving people around the world. It's changing what we eat, how we eat, and it will change that further. I come from Suffolk. My mum's garden now used to reliably have 24, 25 inches of rain every year. It now doesn't. She has big confidence in drought. Farming down there has been hit very hard. Twinned, and it is twinned, that is species loss. I started by saying, you know, there's a stat recently between 2004 and 2023, we lost 64% of flying insects in some of our nature reserves. 64%. And it wasn't very good in 2004. It's not like that was the heyday. The heyday was in the 50s or 60s. So this spiral is going down. So those two things really work together. We know about flooding. It's flooded here, it's flooded in Keswick, flooding is on the increase, the sharpness of rainfall, all these things, but also the twin with that drought. Not so much here, but cities, we've got water, sorry, air quality issues in cities, we've got water quality issues as well. This is a big thing. Mental well-being, physical well-being, and there's lots of studies showing that it's getting worse in our young. It's also not very good in our aging population either. We're isolated, we're not working together in the way we used to. We sit down more, we drive more, we don't walk, exercise, get together. So these are really significant parts of our work. And as a conservationist, I'm extremely bothered about well-being. I'm also extremely bothered about food inequalities. So that's a lot to take on board. And it's no wonder I've been depressed for quite a few years about the way things are. So tree Amble is my way out of that. It's a very positive way out of that. That's just some stuff on top of those books. 1.5 probably no longer reliable. Species loss. This is the stats. I was looking for 2042, England, 65%. Now, is it ivermectins? What is it that's getting into our habitats that's killing insects? Metals, 2050 spring weather forecast. Look it up. Go online and see it. It reckons 7% more water overall, but periods of 40 degrees centigrade, 2 weeks plus in the UK. And you can design climate change if you want to, but go and look at the stats. They're there for you. It's really significant, and it's really something we should do about. It's a fantastic vet called Claire Little, and she says she's done some stuff on this. She's doing some work at the moment. Cattle in 40 degrees centigrade are less fertile, less productive, and have less well-being. So, if we want cattle to work for us in the future on those temperatures, we're going to stop. Water quality, England's rivers are contaminated. This is government stuff. It's here, it's Institute of Fisheries Management. The government stats contaminated by a chemical cocktail of sewage, agriculture, and growth pollution. One of my projects, we've just got a study going where we're looking at 3 different becks on a farm up in the Pennines. One is pristine, perfect and wonderful. One comes off the road and one comes off the main farm. We're doing the study on those three becks to see which one is, we know which one's best, but we need the empirical evidence. So stuff going up the roads is pretty awful becks. Loads of roads are plugged into becks to get rid of the water, but it's got salts, it's got hydrocarbons, it's got all the stuff coming on the tires. Here, water quality, this is serious stuff in terms of our water quality, and that's possibly why one of the reasons why we don't actually reach out more. Well-being, we know those issues, poor food outcomes. I don't often buy a paper, but I was in Booths earlier, just getting a snack, and I saw this headline on The Guardian today. Largest review of ultra-processed food warns of 32 damaging effects. High intake led to 50% rise in risk of death from cardiovascular disease and lots of other things. We have some very poor food outcomes, particularly amongst the foresters. These are all big things and scary. So let's start to move towards the positive, because we need to go there. Where do we come into this? A great friend of mine, Richard, who looks like Bob Dylan, has the longest scarf in the world, works for an organisation called Land Life. And in your life, you meet people occasionally who are beyond, above and beyond. They are just the go-to, but you think, oh, this person is just amazing. Richard has been working with wildflowers for the same length I've been doing my tree thing. And he has been getting some real success in getting wildflowers into some amazing spaces. And his work came out with a guy called Grant Luscombe. Grant set up Land Life in Liverpool, and when they were just taking down all of the old tenements and back-to-backs, and he was grinding down brick dust, putting it out to the sites, these derelict sites, and putting wildflower seeds in the brick dust to give colour back to Liverpool. And Richard was his acolyte. Richard's now doing this in Manchester on road schemes and all sorts of things. And they may be temporary habitats, but the effect on people of connecting with colour and vibrancy and insects and birds that come back to these things is amazing. And Richard is he's a very vital person that makes these things happen. And we've linked up together on lots of projects now. And I just think this bring nature back to people thing is so important for us all. It lifts you, it gives you well-being, it's incredibly levelling, it's humbling, and it brings people together. And that's what I really like. So that's where we try and come back into this. Now, I do work for a charity called the Woodland Trust. They pay me for an awful long time. Clearly, tree Amble is my pet thing, but I have to do a better job. And the key thing about a charity is we are able to go where government agencies aren't, but we're governed by charity commission. So we have to be very careful about how we spend, where we spend our money. And so I have to be quite careful about what I do and where. But I think if we get a nature outcome out of it, a tree outcome out of it, then we're pretty close to our charity objectives. And I think we're in this game at the moment, landscape restoration. It suggests that the landscape needs restoration. I think it does. I also think we can restore it. And I think we can restore it with people very much in mind. And for me, landscape restoration has these three main tenets. One is landscape function, habitat mosaics, so that's complexity, and then connectivity. So function is where we have, for example, watercourses which are restored, watercourses which are flowing in the right direction, for example. Habitat mosaics is invariably different sorts of habitats connected together. So that's complexity in the landscape. And then connectivity is when we started to add it all together, tease those things in so that we have, for example, the bird coming from South Africa that's tired of hungry, coming back here to breed, can fly between habitats within which it's got food, security, safety. Connectivity is really important. So my example there, when I've written down where we can create good quality food products at the same time as restoring soils. Landscape functions, it has to function for food, it has to function for our own well-being and places to live. It has to function for water, air, wildlife. Mosaics. We want more structure, more variety of flowers and trees and grazing animals and types of land management. In many farming landscapes in the last 60 years, we've specialised. So if you go where I was born, big wheat fields now, and it's pretty much only wheat. There could be some oilseed rape, but not very much else. Up here, it's sheep. Other places, it's other sorts of farming. Whereas my grandfather used to have a mixed farm where he had animals following the plough on the stubbles. They would have grass lays. He had horses on the farm that he used to plough with when he was a lad. Lots of different animals, lots of different systems, and that mixed system has gone very much. Interestingly, it's now coming back. And so that habitat mosaic could be a farming habitat mosaic, or it could be wildlife habitat. And that connectivity, as I said earlier, it's got to be connected. Now, one place that we've done quite a lot of work, and would probably all have driven down through the T-Bay Gap. You might well have seen the fencing on the, as you're going south, the left-hand side. T-Bay Commoners, we started working with T-Bay Commoners. Tim Winder, the chair there, about 13 years ago. Under an environmental stewardship scheme, working with the commoners, we fenced off around about 128 hectares of the common, fenced it off, took the stock out, planted some trees, and then started studying what came back. Now, the starting stat for me, nature, is on these areas of the common, we've gone from 4 breeding bird species at present 11 years ago to 13 breeding bird species. So in 10 years, we've gone from a pretty dire situation with birds to one which is really quite encouraging. And that's only 10 years. So landscape restoration is possible. And bear in mind, we've left 88% of the common under its previous management. So it's still being raised in the same way. We've just taken some of the elements. This flower, Scalius, was pretty much not present when we started. And now we have whole banks of Scalius with bees, butterflies, moths. It's really quite stunning. Tim Winder, we worked with the chair there. To be fair, he was quite sceptical to start with. He had quite a lot coming around to do. And now we're firm friends. He loves what he's done. He's very proud of it. He talks about it. He's bought his own land to do similar things with. So this is, I think it's quite enthralling when you start to see what happens. And you actually could do a bit more of that. He's still farming very intensively. He's making good living out of farming, but he's done more of this as a result of what he's doing. That's really positive. Slower water flows. We've measured the water coming up T-Bay Pond. And he's had a pretty turbulent history. We can now demonstrate through our work that we're slowing the flow of water. T-Bay used to flood from overland flows after rain. That's now not happening. So we think they're happening on slower water flows, stopping flooding. We know there's more water on the common. We know there's more carbon storage. We've studied it. We also have anecdotal evidence that visitors to the common are now enjoying it because there's more trees on the common, more wildflowers, and more birds. So we think we can win landscape restoration. So trees. Trees is what I'm paid for. But a really interesting stat came in a few years ago, which we put a company with some satellite satellites, whatever they do, GPS, thank you. And they worked out that in this country, about half our tree canopy is not in a wood. Now, we always assume woods are trees, that's where trees are, and everything else is not trees. Actually, half our canopy is outside. Woods. And each and every one of those trees has some function of landscape, whether it's shade animals, whether it's big part of the nitrogen cycle, it's taking nutrients up from underground, it's taking it out to its leaves, its leaf drop goes back to the soil to the earth. Whether it's slowing down the flow of water or changing how water works in the soil. But this 50% is the most under threat. Woods pretty much are guaranteed to be woods long term, but trees and landscape are disappearing at an alarming rate. And certainly with the wind we have, winds we have. I don't know, I've seen more trees uprooted this winter than I have for a long time. And they're big trees. And those big trees are really important. So something that's 200 years old, it's gnarly and craggy with rot holes, all the bugs and beetles that live in those. Once that tree's gone, they could very gone as well. And those trees are really important for owl roosts, for bat roosts, for bugs and beetles. If you've got dead wood in, that dead wood habitat's extremely important as well. So I got really interested in this because this plays out really well with how I work with farmers. I talked about Claire Woodland's work earlier. You know, this climate change stuff suggests we're going to have to build more shade and shelter in the landscape. But if we're losing these big trees in the landscape, we need to start planting to replace those now for the future shade and shelter and shade. Agroforestry. Almost anywhere you go in the tropics, they do agroforestry. So it's multi-layered. They'll have fruits, they'll have timber, they'll have vegetables, all sorts of things through the forest. Here we tend to have a relatively monocultural view of agriculture. But agroforestry is definitely coming up the agenda. Even the Forest Commission now accepts the agroforestry thing, and they're putting in a grant for agroforestry. So that is bringing back trees to farm systems. And it's a wide church. It could be a Cumbria, hedgerows, field trees. In the southeast of England, it could be rows of trees which could be fruit, nut. It could be croppable trees for timber, within which you still plough and you still have your arable alleys, but you're adding in an extra layer. And that layer is there for shade, shelter, shade. It's there for changing how water works within crops and seasonality. Agriculture is really interesting. Lots of folks I'm working with are looking to reorganize agriculture along polyculture lines. And by that, I mean multiple different crop types. And I've got some books here because I thought it'd be really interesting just to show it's not just me saying this, but there's loads of books now written on this stuff. The original one, probably Joe Salatin, that's a really fantastic book. It's heavyweight, salad bar beef. But he talks about polycultures, not monocultures, as does small farm future. Lots and lots of those. It's great stuff on the internet. So where we're going to go is agriculture should be a win-win for us three people. It should be. It's not well too much on this slide, but thinking about agriculture and trees and regenerative agriculture is what I'm interested in. It starts with the soil. Aims to add value to the land over time by restoring biology and natural processes. It's not abstractive. It's about food production with mineral inputs, and it's people focused. And that's probably where we're going to head with most of my work, I think, going forward. Why? Because trees and shrubs are a big part of regenerative agriculture approaches. Whether it's hedges and field trees, leaf browse, really important for many animals. Leaves have got sugars, proteins, enzymes, fiber. Fiber is really important for the guts of most browsing animals. Often missing in modern agricultural systems. If they're eating simple, simplified forms of grasses, we've got 2 or 3 or 4 grasses in the field, they're not getting enough fiber, it's not very good for them. So leaf browse is really important. Animal welfare and well-being. If you turn cattle out into a wood pasture with lots of trees and things to browse, they seem to be happier. They exhibit much more natural behaviours. We now know also from studies, Pond Fen was the original one in Wales, where farmers got together. They had to change their system because it wasn't economic. They decided to go outdoor rearing with their sheep. In order to outdoor rear, they realised they had to put more shelter in the landscape. They put some really big shelter belts in. And lo and behold, they discovered that actually, close to hedgerows, close to trees, the grasses came earlier in the season and stayed longer because they got different shade, different temperatures, and different water associations with the trees. So seasonality in grasses happens when you put trees and shrubs back. Increasing soil function. We decompact soils with tree roots. We circulate nitrogen in different ways, we encourage earthworms. We start to rebuild soils actually when we put these back into the landscape. The soils are very often in modern farming compacted by machinery or animals. Once you get the compacted soil, it's very difficult for those roots to go down. It doesn't move water very well, so water tends to sheet off. If water sheets off, it tends to take soil with it, so we lose soil. So the soil function is really important. Increasing biological activity, especially mycorrhizal fungi. I've had to learn how to spell mycorrhiza because I can't get it right ever. and really have to learn it. Mycorrhizal fungi, again, books on it. It's a fantastic one. David Montgomery, The Hidden Half of Nature, is all about fungi and their activities and how they work with treatable roots. And the way they work with roots pretty much is root bacteria, mycorrhizal fungi. The fungi go out to the hypha and they drag in all the nutrients and moisture and move that towards the root. The root exchanges that through the bacteria with sugars it's produced through its leaves. We're now understanding this stuff and realizing that nature is incredibly productive. Once we start to strip out our fungi, we have to feed plants, because nature's been doing it for an awful long time. A nutrient cycle, which is a really important part of the process. So, if we start to get our agriculture slightly changed back towards regenerative agriculture, we can think about reducing our inputs. Now, the war in Ukraine was a wake-up call, I think, to a lot of people, because it spiked prices. And I heard the stat the other day. I thought it was interesting for the conversation because we can talk about regenerating landscapes and how we get there. British farmers paid an additional £1.45 billion in fertiliser costs since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's a very energy-intensive process to create fertiliser, the way we do it. Because of gas prices spike, it's created a lot of costs. So when your inputs are soaring costs, and you've got some of the negative effects of having those inputs in the first place, you need to start thinking about how to do things differently. And that we come back into the debate again. Now, I don't know if anyone thinks that's good agriculture, but that's happening in the Eden Valley at the moment. And this is what I would say is, well, one of the worst ways to farm. It's extremely extractive, and that's what we want to try and get away from. Interestingly, there's guidelines for rules for water, which are going to publish. These are legal guidelines, and farmers must take account of significant risk of pollution. They must protect land within 5 meters of fresh water from poaching. This is a stream, it's completely bare, soil rushing up into it. And it goes on. But we're not farming rules for water. This type of agriculture doesn't really work for me. So, where are we going with my conversation? This 3 Amble case studies we've done is all about talking to people who are trying to invert that. They're trying to be regenerative. They're trying to look at how they can involve people in agriculture and managing land. And my bit is helping them through that process, providing them some trees, some shrubs, some shelters, some things that we can. And I'm going to start with Fidelity Western. So Fidelity farms Romshire Farm there in Kent. She's part of a group which I think she helped found called Pasture for Life. And Pasture for Life is literally about making sure your animals eat nothing but grass. She farms organically and is successful. She's started up quite a lot of activity, and I think Hassan worked with Pasture for Life, does bits and pieces with them. Really interesting to see how you can think about things in a different way and start to restore your life. So she's regenerative, organic, and believes that animals should be fed upon grass and grass alone. One of my favourite 3 Amble case studies was this this group in eastern Yorkshire, and this came about just before COVID. A lovely lady had saved up lots and lots of money for her new kitchen and new bathroom, and was sat on this pot wanting to have these lovely things in her house. And she was talking to the neighbour one day, and the neighbour was saying, "Oh, I've got this block of land out back, and I'm probably going to develop it for housing." And she's like, "We've just moved here, we haven't done this property up, we're not really convinced about this." In the end, she bought the land. And rather than putting houses on it, she went to the local community and said, "I bought this land, I'd like to plant some trees. We've got a hedgerow. Would you like to come and help me plant trees? And then COVID hit. And so one by one, local community came out, social distancing, and planted some trees and some hedgerows, which we provided for. And then somebody said, well, really, that's all kind of one hit. Can we not do a bit more? And she said, well, let's build a pond. So we built a pond. And then 5 years later, 4 years later, they've now got polytunnels on site. They've got organic veg beds. They welcome all in the community to come and help, and they can go anytime they want. It's become a centre where the community get together to grow things. They're doing organic veggies, and they're now doing organic veg box next to villages. They've got organic flowers that they're doing. They come together as a group, and it's like it's an outdoor version of Men in Sheds. So it's bringing people together. It's producing really good food, and it's highly productive in terms of the area of land for their output. It's highly productive, and I think this kind of community agriculture is actually an extremely valuable case study that we should be looking at. I went down to Suffolk to see David Wolfe. David's father, Martin Wolfe, was a plant pathologist by training. And he worked at ADAS MAP in the old days, doing plant pathology. And he spent most of his life trying to resolve pathogens in plants through chemical work. But he always had this nagging down to the back of his mind that there ought to be a natural solution to some of these pests and diseases. So when he retired, him and his wife bought this, it's only about 68 acres, I think, so not a very big farm, bought this farm and set about trying to think about how they could change the course of diseases through land management. And it's not a big enough farm to make a big living from, so they have everything's trial and research. It's still going on. Unfortunately, Martin died, but his son David is now taking over. And David has created an amazing space to go to. The lady in the bakery, that we saw the photograph earlier, she's there. They have veg growers, they have community groups that come in and do various things. They have willow workers working there. They have started growing lentils in Suffolk again. And last summer they had their first dal festival, where they invited 13 dal chefs from all over the country and the continent together to do a dal festival on Suffolk grown lentils. And it's a fantastic place. But Martin, when he set out, was looking at this. This is this classic kind of agroforestry system where you have a wide, combinable, tropical alley. And between them, you have some other vegetation. In this case, it's hazy. And the system they're now set up where they coppice by the row of hazel. A lot of the coppice that comes off there goes to hedge laying in Suffolk. So traditional hedge laying, spars and estate and hedge laying. That's a really good croppable income for them. They get good income off that. And they can combine the crop down the middle. What Martin discovered was, in this process, disease transfer through dropped markedly from one alley to the next, to the next, to the next. So if something on the prevailing leaves comes in, by the time it's in the third alley, it's almost disappeared. Because you've got different insects in there, you've got different processes, you're breaking up, you've got a break. This is fantastic. So that agroforestry system is being researched very, very heavily. They've also got stackable outputs from that. So they've got hazelnuts, they've got the hazel poppers, they've got unminable crops, they've got the vegetables, they've got the fruit. So it's a fantastically layered system.
Sorry, Pete, can I just interrupt? For the benefit of the Zoomers, can you kind of make sure you're projecting out that way? Because when you talk to the screen,
Yep.
we leave it on the map.
Okay.
That's okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
That's all right. So the other thing they've come up with out of this project is a thing called YQ grains. So most grains are clonal grains with the same grain multiplied a billion times. On this project and now growing is this idea of non-clonal wheats or YQ wheats, where every grain in the field is different. Now, with climate change being where weather is more unpredictable, we might have a drought or we might have a wet summer. With a YQ class wheat, you don't get an overall higher yield, but you get a stable yield because each farm is different and reacts differently. So these systems are showing that there are different ways of cropping than we are used to. Andrew Hatton, fantastic, amazing guy at the top of Nidderdale, has restored to Yorkshire a very traditional old cheese making farm now. He farms in a really remote position. It's absolutely beautiful, right on the edge of the moor. When I went to see him last February, the curly were up there. It was a sing-song place, absolutely fantastic. But he used to have 400 sheep. He's dropped his sheep numbers to 40 to manage the fell, and has brought in a small herd of shorthorns, and they've got 15 of those, which he now milks in summer. So it's a seasonal cheese he's created. So when there's enough sugars and things in the grasses, he can create cheese. And so he milks and makes cheese in the summer, and he goes back to have a rest basically in the winter, which is great. Now his cheese is really good cheese. It's sold in Neal's Yard in London. I said to him it's award winning. He said, no, I haven't won an awards yet, but I should do. It's a really good cheese, but he's brought that back to Nidderdale in a system which is a very historic system. And at the same time, it's brought back much more wildlife. So he's making a profit, he's running a small farm, he's brought back a traditional cheese. It's a really fantastic case study of what can be done. And then Tom and Alwyn. Now this is really quite extreme, and we wanted to have something which was pushing the boundaries of what we could achieve with in terms of nature conservation. Bearing in mind, I think we need to restore our landscapes really quite quickly. This is ratcheting it up a level. We took a metre deep plough into these. It's actually 72 acres of wildflowers that we created, but we took a big plough and we turned the whole thing over. Buried all the fertility, buried all the chemicals, brought up subfertile soil, planted lots of wildflowers, and then planted trees into it. And within a couple of years, we started to get red data book species coming back. So species that are not on the map started to find this site. It's a big, colourful, wonderful space in Yorkshire. The trees grow like stink because they've just got all the mycorrhizal fungi they need. They've got the soils in the right condition. They've got all the water they need there. And Alwyn's is just taken off. So he's now doing consultancy. He's got well-being walks. They do dawn and dusk walks. They do bat surveys. They do all this sort of with people. Is very much part of it. Insect biomass has gone off the scale. It's fantastic. Birds have come back in. To the extent in the middle of Yorkshire, they had a peregrine nesting in pylon on site because they got so much bird life on site. So when we get this kind of activity at scale, it really brings nature back. Now, it's not farming. And lots of people said, why have you taken a perfectly good arable field and put wildflower seeds into it? The answer is, we can't do this everywhere, we won't do this everywhere, but where we have done it, we can show that nature comes back. So some kind of process like this that's mediated would actually provide us with much more nature than we've got at the moment. And many of the traditional ways of planting trees, for example, are just not bringing biodiversity back in at the same speed. So I really love this process. But Alwyn's 92 acres overall weren't making him a living. They now are. So he's still got a living off his land. It's wildflower seeds, it's people coming in. It's got honey, it's got goats milk, goats cheese, people in abundance, and nature in profusion. Another thing we've been working on very much, thinking about the trees and farming side, is bringing back wood pastures. Now, thinking about my 50% of the trees are not in woods. I know this is like a very wooded wood pasture, but actually, I'm sure you've all been to Lowther or looked at Lowther, what they're doing there, these tree cages in the landscape. They brought longhorn cattle back to that landscape. Putting those trees back as landscape apart from trees, bringing back the cattle, changing the nature of those seeds. The cattle love it. It's highly productive. It won't ever be as productive as the conventional farming, but it's zero inputs in terms of chemicals. And worming, you're actually having to worm these beasts a lot less because they're in a natural system. They've got fire, they've got the best diet, and they're outdoor really the whole time. So we're trying to bring back some of these systems, which were what we'd have been doing a century ago, possibly 2 centuries ago anyway. Native breeds, out of the house, under trees. It's a very ancient system. And if you go to Central Europe, Carpathian Mountains, there are big areas that still manage like this, really good. We haven't really got the pig thing back in Cumbria yet, although I know there's some pigs not far from here that like being in the wood. But again, in Europe, we've got wild boar or other pigs using these systems. We've also got sheep in the systems, but it's again, it's the right number, the right place. What I like about this is lower chemical inputs to zero and reduce the treatment. I think there's a really critical things for bringing back nature. Cattle dung is extremely valuable for insects, and if it's got good insects, it's got good birds associated with it. So much of our cattle dung at the moment has got chemicals in it. It's not broken down by dung beetles. It's not good enough. Try and reverse that. And I have to put this in every talk I do because I just love that cow. Kingsdale Head is again another case study we've got where we've been working with the new landowners there. It was a farm at the top of, it's above Ingleton. It's the top of the valley. It's never been productive all year round because it's basically peat bog. It's only got 32 acres of in-by land. The rest is peat bog. So it's wet, it's boggy, poor grazing, although it's had a grazing history, almost always those animals were taken somewhere else in the winter. It came on the market, it wasn't sold for 2 years. I worked with the new owners to buy it, and we putting back at the moment the wood pasture system, using rigid gallery cattle, and they're out the wood the whole time. So it's quite a small output in terms of meat, but it is still being farmed. We've restored all the peat bog, so we're storing carbon, we're slowing down the flow of water. We're working on the becks to make sure they're more sinuous and have more material in them. So wildlife is definitely coming back as a result of what we're doing. For people, we haven't lost any jobs, and we're now looking to actually increase the number of people employed there. I think that's really important when we do these things. We should not be losing rural jobs. In fact, we should be increasing them. And as I said earlier, Water, we did lots of stuff. They've gone from 2 or 3 people originally employed there to about 2023. So we can do it by bringing in funding for these different projects. So it shouldn't be, if it is a loss of rural employment, then we don't have to support it. It should be increasing. So all of these case studies, if I look this way, I need to put my glasses on. The joy of my work has been working with people, and we've done some amazing things with people, and all the creativity and engagement of all those different people trying to achieve different things. For me, Triumph has been a joy by bringing those people back in and trying to share and actually cross-fertilize ideas. I had the joy last week of talking to an Irish chap from Dublin who said, I've been listening to your podcast, and I've got lots of money. I want to do one of these projects. Can I do one of these projects? And I said, well, I don't really work in Southern Ireland, but we've got people over there that can do this with you. And to think that somebody said, actually, I've seen what you're doing, and I can see these other people doing this stuff. I want to do more of that. So it's paid for itself already. So people right front and center. I think we should be trying to increase niches of complexity for nature. We've simplified the landscape, whether it's by dredging watercourses and straightening them, or whether it's by cutting trees down and replacing them with cypress spruce rather than the multiple trees we might have. By reversing that, by making things more complex, whether it's height or density and thickness, we need to get more niches back. When we do things like common at T-Bay, we're creating climate resilience. We're providing places for nature to move up the hill if they can. We're slowing down the flow of water, we're storing more water, and we're storing carbon. We need to do that. A lot of them have got novel techniques, whether it's deep ploughing in Yorkshire that we did, or mob grazing. Mob grazing is something which has now come up before, where we corral beasts into a smaller area and we move them on more frequently. That has some amazing benefits for soil. So there's lots of novel techniques that we're working with. And I suppose I put a lot of this into effectively old school farming, but with a modern twist. So using things my grandfather would have done, which is to have the animals following the arable around with the grass lays, having lots of different animals, but working with some of the biology we know, some of the mycorrhizal fungus stuff we know, some of the mob grazing techniques we know, and actually just thinking about those old techniques, how we can bring them back and actually drive forward the future agriculture. So my last slide, really, I had to go back to Olwyn. This is just, it is extreme, but it's the most joyful site I've ever worked on because of what's come back. And these flowers that you hear are all, or should all be common flowers in Leicester, and they're not. A lot of them are arable flowers that would have cropped up in our arable cropping. They've all been pretty much sorted out from that. We don't have poppies in our fields anymore. We don't have cornflowers, corn chamomile, maybe at the edges. We've got oxeye daisies in there, creeping buttercup. It's a creeping buttercup in Cumbria. Viper's bugos. Bees love Viper's bugos. It's disturbed ground. We've seen very little of that in fields anywhere these days. So these once common flowers that we can bring back. When we bring them back, we get nature back in abundance. So this is my parting shot really, is if you've got any way of bringing back complexity, and particularly with nectar and pollen, then try and do it. So I think we're on about 55 minutes from that one. So that's the Lowther wood pasture that we're bringing back. It's a lovely longhorn cattle. And Ian Jack, a few years ago, did these single trees that adopted them out of the landscape. And the Lowther project now is just increasing those trees across the landscape. That's wood pasture coming back. In 2 centuries, those will be big, fat oak trees, lots of big round crowns, hopefully lots of bats and owls, the big considering. So that's kind of a distillation of Pete's 30 years. I've tried to make it a cogent story and bring lots of different things in and try not to lose you, but you can see there's clearly some big issues we're trying to cope with, and trying to see how we can motivate people to think about those big issues and drive change in their land management that includes people and nature and ideally farm produce as well. So there we go. Thank you.
Lee, thank you very much indeed.
That's all right.
Fantastic. I don't think we've had someone here who's been so passionate about flowers. And I think that's great. And to devote your life to it, as you obviously are doing now, sort of wake up call in a way. I don't know if there's specific Cumbrian flowers that we should be making note about. You're probably not aware that we have habitat program in which we initiated in Matterville down here, the community-driven process of trying to identify biodiversity. And volunteers have been mobilised to do that. We are looking at flowers and looking at the habitat types. And what's extraordinary, it's coming out of just finding our way, is that there was a habitat survey done in 1980. And we are now trying to plot the differences that we can see now. Okay. Compare it with 1980 and look at, and there's so many new ideas coming out. There's a genuine passion in Matterville around here to do that work.
But the brilliant thing is there's lots of people around the country, and the whole point of this is that we've gone from Kent to Athens to talk to people who are doing different things. You know, it's very easy to be negative because there's so much to worry about. But I think people are genuinely bothered and want to do stuff. And actually, it's so valuable when you know somebody else is doing something similar somewhere else, and then you know, okay, we're not alone.
Maybe I'll kick off the questions. Are you an outlier in the Woodland Trust? I was more or less expecting to hear something about woods.
Yes.
I haven't heard so much about woods. And your passion, is that, you know, is it, to what extent is your working life working at the margins, or are you finding the Woodland Trust itself?
Well, we still
find this on as a sort of
Yeah.
campaign and trying to support diversity of approaches to trying to promote regenerative agriculture.
So I'll answer that in 3 ways. One is I am an outlier, always have been. Another is that actually I'm a pragmatist. So for me, I want everybody to plant a tree. So I'm not too worried about whether it's 10 hectares, 2 hectares, or 1 tree, I want people to step over that line and plant a tree. And once they've planted 1 tree, they almost always come back a year later and want to plant another one. So, and I think we've also changed the thinking in the Woodland Trust. We have been very focused on woods, but when that research came out about actually half our canopy is outside of woods, I think there was a wake-up call for lots of different people. So those 2 things, pragmatically, if I want to work with lots of people in Cumbria, I have to go on the farm and find out what they will do and what they want to do. And by working with them over a period of years, we know that we've got change. We can see it, and positive change. So if you're going on the principle you've got to plant a wood, then we're not going to get anywhere. But planting a hedge or a tree or something, or a riparian habitat, and then working with those people to help them manage it and come back year on year on year, then you know you're going to get change. So if you're here forever, which I hope to be, then you hope you're going to get that change. And the trust has changed as well. So I think we've brought them back this way. And we now have people in the trust working on farming and agroforestry, which we didn't have 3 years ago. So
In fact, you spoke at a conference at Ringing on regenerative agriculture, and I think the 6 inches of soil film so on was something which linked very much to that sort of story.
yes, yeah, very much so.
Question from the floor from the Zoomers.
What's your interaction with the Forestry Commission and their continuing monoculture obsession? Are you going to get them to change, or is that out of your scope? Or
Well,
I'll repeat the question because for the Zoomers' benefit,
yeah,
sometimes they don't hear questions. So,
And if you could come a bit further as well.
so Colin was asking about your relationship with the Forestry Commission
yeah.
and whether you're having any impact on changes in the way in which they plant trees, diversity trees.
Am I having any impact? No, I don't think so. I mean, we always need to come at these things from multiple points, don't we? So we import something like 80% of our timber in this country. So if we're going to import it from the Balkans or anywhere else in Europe or even North America, do we know that they're managing their forests better than we are? Or do we think they might be worse than us? Are they strip felling? Are they taking everything out? I mean, so if we don't know that, or we can't guarantee that, then is it not incumbent on us to manage our forests in a way that are productive and here? So I think there's a very strong argument as we need more productive forestry in the country. Whether it should be monocultural, I would definitely. I don't like monocultures. They don't work for nature. They don't work for water. Clear fell sites don't work for nitrogen cycling, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's an awful lot Forestry Commission and others could do to improve commercial forestry. Do we need it? I think we do. I also think it's sad that we always pick on Cumbria or Scotland to plant Sitka spruce. Why can't we pick on London or the southeast to plant Sitka spruce, where it's accessible, it's flat, it's good growing ground? You know, why do we always have to put them at the top of the hill up here? So I think there's lots of questions we could ask, but we do need commercial forestry. I would just say when we do it, we should make sure we've got plenty of margins around watercourses, lots of diversity of age and structure, try and bring continuous cover forestry, so we have always those trees on the ground, and we go and pick the best trees and we move them on, rather than this monoculture clear fell. Am I having an influence? No, I don't think so. But it's a big conversation, we keep having it.
Any more comments from the floor in the hall?
Yeah.
Perhaps
Yeah,
an
there's one
observation.
coming, yeah.
Sorry. Perhaps an observation. I remember having a chat with Lennoxtown, north of Glasgow.
Yeah.
I think it was Scottish Woodlands. And they had planted Sitka on what was a potato plot at the hospital when they grew their own food. So it was the best Sitka crop in knew anyway.
Yeah.
And it was right trees in the right place. Rest of it quite nice mixed woodland.
Yes. It's a tough one because we, as human
Not
beings,
really a question,
Oh.
just
Not more an observation.
not an observation about it.
an observation about planting a Sitka spruce on
Okay.
potato fields, is that right?
Your comments about we should be, well, it's a bit like sticking wind turbines on the top of hills here. It'd be better around the cities that need the power. And the same, you know, you're saying, you know,
Yeah.
no, I don't really agree, but anyway. But it's your comment about productive trees might be better grown than productive land.
Yeah, and
Yes.
again, thinking about agriculture and regenerative agriculture, actually, we can grow trees and crops, useful trees in the right places in the right, without negatively impacting on agriculture.
Yeah.
And for my mind, I think we simplify things too quickly. And you know, I mean, we've around Cumbria, I've been taking to plenty of plots of timber that we planted at the top of the fell, are now uneconomic to fell. Uneconomic, they're not doing anything for it, they fall over, they're dangerous. So we shouldn't be engaged in that, really. We should be thinking about putting the right trees in the right places that are accessible and we can actually take a crop from them. Some friends of mine in Pennines have just paid £7,000 to clear up the wood that was planted by their predecessors, and it blew over. You know, so it's cost them to take that comfort off, which wasn't the intention, I'm sure. But so I think we need to think about this in a landscape way and think about how we manage the landscape at scale for all the different outputs that we need. Food is primary, but we also need fibre as well, and we need jobs, and we need nature. That's that.
Gordon, you've got a question online?
Okay, we have a question from Jane. So you are planting wildflowers in areas which you are planting trees in. As the trees grow, won't they make conditions wrong for many of the wildflowers?
Yes. But I'm really happy with habitats that transition. What we're trying to do, in a sense, there is give the trees the best start. And by having this polyculture, we'll have much more fungal activity, we'll have more insects in there. And also, over time, what we'll do with those trees is we'll manage them. So some of them will be felled, we'll create openings in that forest. That forest needs to be dynamic to be really wildlife friendly. So again, with our forestry management, we need to have dynamism back, which might in some cases mean putting cattle back into woodlands. So we've got dynamic processes. A woodland that's all even aged, all one height, with nothing at the bottom is a dead end as far as I'm concerned. So those kind of projects, and forest of flowers, we've done about 30 of those now around the north. It's all about dynamic change. Anything held in stasis tends to get worse. So yes, conditions will change, but all the way around the rides, we'll have wildflowers. We know from past monitoring of sites that Landlife did the first one I did with was in 2005. They've done some 2 or 3 years before that. Just the sheer joy of nature is we've now got more species on that site than we planted. So one we did, we had 16 species of wildflower plus 9 species of trees. We've now got 42 different species to plant on the site. Because nature comes in, it brings spores and seeds, and it creates dynamism. So it will change. And it doesn't matter which way it heads, really.
Maybe the last question from either the floor or.
Yeah, so a question. This one's from me. So you talk about hedges,
Yeah.
and then you talk about field trees, but you never talked about trees in hedges.
Right?
Now, what I mean by that is obviously the modern way of keeping hedges cut is just to flail them. And because we're flailing them, we're not allowing certain trees to actually grow and protrude through the hedge to become a fully developed tree. What can we do about that?
Well, I teach hedge laying. I love hedge laying. We should try and go back to those old traditions. There's now more money for paying people to do these old traditional methods. But we're struggling to find people who can afford to live here, who can afford to work in those kind of environments. So I would say do as much as we can to go back to some of those traditional methods of management. If we have to use a flail, we should be doing different heights, hedges, and maybe one side 1 year, another side the next year, maybe the top, vary that top, try and change the shape from a box to an A-frame. There's lots of different things we can do, even with a flail. We need hedgerow trees, and they often, depends on the age of the guy driving the tractor. If they're young, they've got the headphones on or whatever, they'll sort through the log. So it's about how you instruct your hedgerow management, maybe tie ribbons to your oak trees, maybe get community placards saying we want our oak trees. Somehow we've got to get there. So in some respects, the field trees makes that easier. So if you could put a hedgerow in, and then you can have a tree cage here in the field, It's clearly a tree that wants to be there for the long term, and maybe that's one way around it, is to make sure we have that difference. But you're right, we need hedgerow trees, and I kind of skip over that because I think hedgerow trees are really important. But we've got to plan our management around that. And very often that just means to the person on the tractor that's going around, cutting these things, is to say we do want those trees there, please. Mark them up, put them in a tube, make sure they're visible, and then we'll get a bit further with that.
Maybe we should okay, last one.
Just one more.
Yeah.
I've been doing some research on the ancient tree register inventory. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, Woodland Trust started that with the tree forum, 20 years ago or something. Yeah.
I paid some money to get access to I was looking at how many national champion trees there are in Cumbria, compared to the country.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a really low number of national champions in Cumbria of girth and height and so on. Is that what you would say is right?
So the question, just for the Zoomers, is there is the ancient tree inventory, which was tree forum, tree council, and Woodland Trust, and then it's the number in Cumbria of those. It's interesting. You go to the southeast and the south coast, you see big fat old trees and lots more of them. We haven't got as many left in Cumbria. But also, if you think about populations, it's a small population in Cumbria, so it could be that more people have gone out and also measuring them. I think also a big fat oak tree that's 6 hugs round. We measure them in hugs because that's great. So you do 6 hugs round. That's obviously a big old tree. Some of our old trees up here are not so obvious because they're smaller, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I can think of a fantastic elm at the back of Lyap's Tower, which is not particularly round. It's clearly extremely old.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's geography, geology, weather, and just the sheer number of people going out there. But it's a great thing to be part of, is that inventory.
Did you have a last question?
Yeah, there is a last question here, and this one actually comes from overseas. This is from all the way from America. It's from Diana. Do you have issues with deer overbrowsing those spaces you are trying to make more agriculturally diverse?
Deer?
Deer.
Yeah, we do. And sorry, and this is a really challenging one. Because deer are often hidden in the scenery, they're not always that visible. It's only recently that people have really begun to work out what the numbers of deer are. So we've got thermal imaging cameras now. We've got one guy who used to work for the Woodland Trust, is now gone private. He's been doing some big estates, and now he's doing drone runs of the Pennines with this thermal cameras. And what he's showing up is that there's just vastly more deer there than we thought. As a forester, I can tell when deer have been in, and I was on a site earlier today where every single tree tube had been nailed down to the top of the tube with red deer. So we know there's more there. We've got red deer creeping into areas that we haven't been before. We've got many more roe deer. We've got sika and muntjac deer moving up country with climate change. When the muntjac get here, we need to really think about how we deal with that. So yeah, too many deer, but stalking rights are jealously guarded. Most estates have somebody who stalks. They don't always have a target number to cull. We have periods when we can cull and periods when we can't cull. It's a complex story, and some estates want very high numbers for shooting. So the deer thing's a really challenging thing, but we have to find a way forward, because otherwise we're moving flora from woods. The deer take an awful lot of product off the field as well. They take a lot of grass. So yeah, it's not helping agriculture anymore. We need to find a way forward. But again, it's a bit like forestry. It's a big conversation. We need to be big enough to be able to cope with lots of different viewpoints and somehow find a way forward. Yeah.
Can I ask a final question, which I ask every speaker, and that is, as you know, any funds that we raise, we ask people to donate if possible, both online and also here. And we divide that between 50% going to the Friends of the Ultimate Way. We've done rather well this year. We've raised quite a lot of money for a number of different charities, and 50% goes to the charity of your choice.
Okay, I've elected Practical Action, which is a humanitarian-based charity. It's based on Schumacher, which is small is beautiful. It works in lots of poorer countries around the world. It helps with regenerative agriculture projects, with water purification, things like that. So for me, it's practical action. I would say the Woodland Trust, but I think for a small donation that goes a long way, practical action's got an awful lot to offer.
That's great. I have, as I told you, I have personal experience with Practical Action, which is a fantastic organisation working on improvement of technology and all of them. Gordon, do you want to say something or the stage? Or...
Just a thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pete, thank you very much. There's an old saying about you can't see the woods for the trees, or the trees for the woods. I'm not quite sure which way around it goes, but you clearly see both.
Yeah.
And that's a very wonderful thing. I was quite impressed with one of the, you started off that restoring nature is restoring us. And I think that perhaps one of the most valid points that comes away from this evening, that we really do need to restore nature, but obviously we still have to eat. And it's been great to hear about all the things that we're doing for, on a small scale. And I look forward to you coming back and hearing about how we're actually expanding this. Not so much on a large scale, but with the bigger farmers, they need ways to, because they're producing most of the food, but they're taking most of the land. So they need to find a way that they can do both in a way that is economically sustainable to them, economically sustainable to the planet. And last thing was the connection with colour. I had a disconnection with colour this morning. I walked out the back door and the snowdrops that are in the garden that pretty much died, which was sad. But then I walked around the corner and the daffodils, and that was a really wonderful thing. But this connection with colour is something that I hope we can all do. And we can all do in our own little way. So thank you very much, Pete, for coming to talk to us this evening. And as one of our Zoomers said, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.